exactly, right? So Robert, do you want to lead us through, like, because you're going to take the first little bit of this, and this is just kind of a thought experiment. We're going to have a little poll for people. Hopefully we can get up for this, but I'll turn it over to Robert. So the idea of this is just to kind of break the ice, get people thinking a little bit about, you know, about ethical choices, ethical dilemmas, and also just to sort of share how people sort of view this, view different scenarios. It's always nice to see whether or not you're the outlier or with the majority. And so, yeah, Robert, I'll let you take over. You've given a good introduction to yourself. People already have had an introduction to me. So yeah, let's move forward.
All right. Well, this is a thought experiment. It was developed in 1967 by a woman by the name of Philippa Foot. She was a philosopher, and she didn't do a lot of writings. And to the wider world, she's best known, especially to students in undergraduate philosophy and ethics, which is what I teach. She's best known for invented the trolley problem. And it raises some interesting dilemmas about moral decisions that we have to make. And so we're going to run through this little thought experiment, and then we're going to look at what are some practical applications of it. So could we have the next slide, Chase? And I'll just run through the scenario here. So the scenario is that you are driving a trolley car. You're the driver of a trolley car. You don't have anybody in the trolley car. You don't have any passengers. You're by yourself, and you are heading into the maintenance yard at the end of the day, and you lose all power. You have no brakes. You have no lights. You have no horn. All you can do is steer. That's the only thing you can do. And you're heading into the maintenance yard, and ahead on the track going into the maintenance yard are 5 workers who are working on the track. And if you proceed down the track, most likely those 5 workers are going to be killed. But you have the option. You can still steer, and off the side of another track, there's 1 worker. So there's 1 worker on one track, and on the main track going into the maintenance yard are 5. And you have to make a decision. Do I proceed on and potentially kill the 5 people, or do I steer and sacrifice 1 person? And are we going to run that poll right now? So let's ask a question. So ahead of you are 5 workers on the track. On a side track, there is 1 worker. So you can steer onto the side track and kill 1, or keep going and kill 5 workers. What do you do? So while you're thinking about that, we'll run a poll. It is amazing to see how many people we have in the room. This is great. This is really exciting because this is our first conference on communication ethics, and it looks like it's probably going to be an annual affair given the turnout that we have. So we're really thrilled about it. So I'm still voting. This is interesting. Yes, we'll see how this develops.
Is the poll? I can't see the poll. Is it open?
Everybody seems to be done voting. It's 96. We have a 96% and 4%. So why don't we share the results? Can everybody see the results of the poll?
Yeah, we can see them, Robert.
You can see them. Okay, so this is pretty typical what we see, and when we run this little experiment, this thought experiment. So only 4% of the people in the room would say they would stay on track and kill the 5. The vast majority, 96%, say they would steer and kill 1 worker. I'd be interested in finding out from those in the minority position why you made this decision. Why would you stay on the track and kill 5 over 1? Anybody like to offer a thought? Maybe in the chat or Would you like to speak? What about upturning the car and not harming any of the others? Now, yes, I was looking for the third option. So there is no third option, because then you're going to ruin our philosophical our experiment. So, so there is no option. This is the only option you have. So I would prefer to kill one person. That's good. While I realize the context of my above comment does not sound good. Inaction versus interaction. Why kill 5? Comment below. Inaction versus action. The same outcome would occur if I hadn't been there. No, this is true. No, so it's because we've given people the opportunity to steer, so you can make the decision. The decision is in your hands, whether or not you're going to kill 1 or you're going to kill 5. And when people are presented with this option, if it was on autopilot and it was going down the track, you wouldn't have any moral decision to make. It would be, my God, these people are, we're going to hit these people. But you have the ability to steer out of it. And the vast majority of people in this experiment choose to sacrifice 1 person over 5. But let's just change this up a little bit and see what happens. The next scenario, there are 5 people on the track, 5 workers on the track, and on the side track, it's a child. So you can steer onto the side track and kill the child, or you can keep going and kill the 5 workers. What would you do? A child versus 5 workers. Now, the dilemma for many people here is that 5 people know what the risks are, when they're working. A child is just playing on the track. But what am I going to do? Am I going to kill 1 to save 5 when that person is a child? Or am I going to kill 5? And the results that are coming in are a little bit slower. The first one was pretty easy. And people are thinking, now I'm in a real moral dilemma here. What am I going to do? What are we at here? 33, you're still thinking, people are still thinking. This is good. This is good. I think I'm not seeing too much more activity. So we have, oh, wait a minute, people are still checking. What we need is music. Da 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 ba 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 bum ba da bum 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 dun da dun 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 bum. What is that from? What game show is that? Well, let's show those results, Chase, and see what we have. All right, do we see these poll results? Jeopardy, thank you, Jen. So these poll results, I will say my answer to raise. So we're in a much more difficult situation here. So we have, as you can see, the results are significantly different than they were before. So now, there was a vast majority who said they would kill 1 worker and save 5. And it was, what were the results? 97% to 3%. And now we have, it has changed considerably. Only 43% would stay on the track and kill the 5 workers. And 58% would steer into the side track and kill the child. So there's still a preference of sacrificing 1 for the greater good to save the 5. But when it's a child that's in the mix, all of a sudden things become much different. And we can keep running this scenario. We can do, what if it was older people? What if it was a guy like me on that side track? I'm an old guy, that sort of thing. And then we have 5 workers. What are we going to do? But let's pose another scenario now. And in this scenario, this is scenario number 3. And in this scenario, there are 5 workers on the track, but on the side track, there's not a person, there's a wall or a piece of equipment or something is on the track that if you steer into the side track, you are most certainly going to kill yourself. You are most certainly going to die in this scenario. But if you keep going, you will kill the 5 workers. So you can steer and sacrifice yourself, or you can keep going and take out the lives of 3 workers. So people are voting. It's always good, you know, what would I do in a situation like that? You know, and I think of a situation that I was in once. I was whitewater rafting, and we're told if somebody falls out of the raft, here's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to get up, dunk the person in the water, and then pull them in on top of you. And so we have a little practice, and then we go out on the water. Well, sure enough, it happened. And it happened to a guy that was sitting right behind me. We were going through this wave, and he went flying out, and he went floating by me, and I froze. I failed in my moment of heroism. And my wife, Gloria, grabbed him and hung onto him, but she wasn't going to get up. There's waves bouncing all around, so she's holding onto them, and she's supposed to get up and dunk him in and grab him. And we just froze, and the guide, once he got us through the waves, ran up, grabbed the guy, pulled him on top of us. So, you know, we can always say we're going to do the right thing, and then when we get down to that moment, it's very difficult. So, so what are the results of this? Steer into the tri-tick and kill yourself, or kill the 5 workers? Most of you would self-sacrifice. 83% would self-sacrifice, and the others would stand the track and kill the 5 workers. So this is a really interesting dilemma on what we do when we have to make moral decisions. And there's some very practical applications of this. And I think, Chase, did you want to take over from here? We're going to run ask you to create a headline from various perspectives on this. I'll turn it over to Dr. Remillard.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. I mean, I think, you know, those are kind of like those questions where on a survey they say, do you recycle? And of course, everyone says, yes, yes, I recycle. But no one really recycles as much as they ever claim to. So I wonder if we're really in that trolley, if we're gonna aim for the wall or not, because we're not, you know, we're never really 100% sure how we're gonna act like that in a situation. But as communicators, we typically aren't in those kinds of scenarios where we're, you know, life or death, but we're usually, we can find ourselves in scenarios where we are, we're having to try to kind of work through you know, work through how we should tell the event and create the story about that event. So I thought it would be interesting, and Robert and I thought Robert, of course, is a former journalist, and so he's much better at creating headlines than I am. But we thought it would be interesting to see what kind of headlines you would come up with for that first scenario. You know, so. The scenario is that you're communications expert, right? And you have to create a you know, a headline for the trolley company. What's the headline that you're creating? You know, what's the press release that you're creating out of this scenario where the driver does swerve? You know, as we all sort of predictively knew that we would pick that lesser. You know, lesser option of death. So, you know, what kind of headlines would you come up with for that first scenario? If you're the trolley company, and just throw them in the chat. Like, let's just see what people come up with, and put them in that chat box.
Any headline writers? When you rescue someone, sacrifice saves lives. Tragic loss on life of trolley line. Trolley kills. Better. Oh, they're coming in now. Hero makes decision that saves citizens. One person killed by trolley. Faulty trolley manufacturer causes employee death. Well, that's interesting. One dead in trolley accident. Trolley car driver saves 5 people. Lawyers are about to get rich. Trolley company investigating deadly crash. One dead in trolley accident. Faulty trolley manufacturer causes employee death. Interesting. Now, remember, you are the communications professional for the trolley company.
Yeah.
So we're going to get to some of these later, but so you're the communications director for the trolley company. What might it be? Live loss.
I think we've had some really good ones in there.
Yeah.
Should we see what the next scenario is? So
yeah, let's do that.
Here's the next scenario. So here, some people are already getting to that, but let's say you're writing now on behalf of the law firm. Right. So you're the communication officer for the law firm, or you're the publicist, public relations person for the law firm. The law firm's you're representing the lone victim.
Faulty trolley causes death. Trolley company negligence causes death.
That's interesting because it wasn't really a faulty trolley. I mean, the trolley actually worked. It
just lost power. It could have been, something with the city not providing power to the track or something, or there was a weather event or something. Anyway, but nobody really knows for that. There's so many different scenarios here, but.
Amber's really going for the pathos there.
Family work.
So, I mean, we're getting a different tone. Like, one of the things I'm noticing is that we're getting a different tone. The first tone was very heroic. We had a lot of sort of heroism, and there was a lot of sort of mentioning of the driver sacrifice, save his lives. Now we're in this other realm where it's tragedy. There's more things to be blamed, like more people to be blamed for it. So the tone has changed, and the direction of blame has certainly arose, right? Like, before there wasn't really blame, it was more action oriented. This is much more about assigning culpability in these ones. And so let's take a look at the last one and see if there's a difference here. And this might be redundant at this point, but let's take a look at this one. Is there a difference if you were a journalist then? We'll really see whether or not, Robert, people feel journalism still has that that fairness. What is it on the books in the States? The Reagan nixed in the 80s, the fairness.
Fairness doctrine. Yeah. Quick thinking too. Journalist struggles with headlines. Oh boy, is that ever true? Yeah. I have my students write in the writing course to write headlines. It's really interesting. It's really interesting for a younger demographic. Sometimes they don't really write headlines. They write something like from Twitter or something. It's interesting.
So I think the last few minutes, and then we'll take a break because we're going to reset for the next session, and give everyone a chance to get some breakfast and so on. Yeah. But we were hoping, Robert and I, when we were designing this, we were hoping to kind of put it out there that this scenario is exactly the same, right? Like nothing has changed in the scenario. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm being West Coast centric. Can I say that? It's like an oxymoron, West Coast centric. But
China Police Service, public service to everyone. Next time, walk.
So, but the event stays the same, but the interpretation of the event changes, and the way in which we look to in the way in which we actually view the event, that changes, and a sort of, this is a famous phrase again by a communication scholar, Stuart Hall. Representation matters. How things are represented matter, because they shape the ways that we understand the world around us, and shape the way in which we have social interactions. And so in this case, what's happening is that the truth is pretty undeniable. As presented, it's sort of there. As Robert says, there's a variety of different reasons why that might have happened that we would maybe want to tease out. But when we're looking at the headlines, we see that there's a real different way of presenting this. And I think one of the things that you were kind of hinting at, Robert, is that there's sort of we live in an attention economy now, not an information economy, but in an attention economy where we have too much information, and we have not enough attention. And so news agencies and news sources are moving to a model of being much more like sensational in their headlines to grab people, to grab that attention and to pull people in, right? And definitely organizations are doing that. And so what we focus on and the information that we get is going to certainly have, it's going to shift and shape our understanding of the reality. So that just sort of putting that out there, and wondering, what are your thoughts about this? What does this experiment that we just kind of ran through tell you about your role as a communicator, or the role of communication in creating truth or transmitting truth about events? Does it offer any kind of insight into parallels that are happening in the real world right now?
If framing is key, could I offer an opinion there, or are we leaving it up to the? When I'm going through this, I mean, this issue of these moral dilemmas of who do we save, we see this playing out right now in the pandemic. This is the crux of what healthcare professionals are trying to do, and the BC Health has on its website. I think I'm going to put the link in here in the chat. They have a lengthy document on it's the BC Health Ethical Decision-Making Framework in the pandemic, and they deal with it's the issue of who gets vaccinated first. How do we decide who's going to get vaccinated? What non-pharmaceutical interventions, as they call it, can best help us avoid this moral dilemma, such as wearing a mask and lockdowns, and should lockdowns be mandatory or should they be voluntary? And as these are very complex issues, because if you look at this decision-making framework that BC Health has, there's an 6-step process that they go through, to arrive at these decisions, and it's very difficult to communicate that to the public. And the goal is to prevent hospitals and healthcare from being so overwhelmed that we don't have to make this decision on who do we save, which track do we go on? Do we go down the one track, kill one and save 5? This is what we've been through here, is a classic example of utilitarian ethics theory, which is the greatest, the outcome should be the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And there are flaws in that strategy and that philosophy, but it just points to the difficulties that communications professionals have in communicating that. There was a session, in a student session we had leading into this the other day. One of the presenters, in her opinion, the BC government did not do a very good job of communicating all those complexities. And it's very interesting, like in Los Angeles County, you may have seen this in the news, there was order issued to ambulance drivers to not transport patients to the hospital that had little chance of surviving. Because in little more than a month, they doubled the number of infections. They went from 400,000 cases kind of 1st of December to 800,000 cases on January 2nd, and they were overwhelmed. And so it gets to this issue of collective responsibility versus issues of rights and freedoms that people have or people say they have. So yeah, if you're interested, I put that link in there about the BC ethics decision framework. It's a really interesting document to have a look at, and I walk my students through it as well, because their decision-making framework is very similar to one that we use when trying to make ethical, resolving moral dilemmas in the field of communications. It's called the Potter box, and it's a 4-step process, but it's essentially the same. So if you're interested in tools, you can look up Potter box, and you can, it's a guide to making an ethical and moral decision for communications professionals. So.
I mean, Robert, I mean, just kind of riffing on what you're talking about there, because I've taught ethics courses in communication ethics before, and I'm sure a lot of people in the room have had these moments, if they're professional practitioners, where they're kind of having to make these decisions. And one of the things that sort of seems to me is that the Potter box, or this sort of 5 or 8 6-step process, they all seem somewhat, I don't know, like they don't really get to the core of it. It almost seems to me like, I had a chat with a colleague of mine who teaches at Mount Royal, Jane McNichol, about this, and she studies ethics. It almost is that ethical reasoning is almost like you can argue the ethics of something in so many different ways from different perspectives, but training in ethics and training in ethics really just sort of raises the consciousness, or like the reflexivity of the participants, to say there is an ethical issue here. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not it's not necessarily going to give you the ability to make a more ethical decision, but it's going to allow you to have appreciation of the fact that you are actually treading on something that could be considered to be an ethical decision.
Yeah, those are very good points, because what we do when I give this assignment to my students and say, okay, you have this scenario, you have to make an ethical decision using the guidance of this 4-step process. But as I tell them, there are no wrong answers. The decision you make is you may disagree with what I think, you may disagree with what the students think, but the decision is yours to make and yours to defend, using this 4-step process of this process of moral reasoning, and trying to figure out, what do I do? Because in our class, communications ethics that I teach, the underlying question is, what is the right thing to do? And these frameworks, they're not recipes to be followed. Here's ingredient 1, ingredient 2, and you bake it in the oven for 350 for 30 minutes, and out it comes. Sometimes there's not always the right answer, and you have to decide, you have to make the decision based on your principles and values and all the guidance that you get. And, try and decide which theory do I use to make this decision. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I think at the end of the day, as communicators, to have a moral compass for yourself as to sort of what you can, look yourself in the mirror and be okay with, and to have a sort of strong sense of responsibility. I think we purposely chose that idea that that you weren't on the trolley, and that you did have a choice to make, to emphasize the fact that even as communicators, we have choices in the ways in which we frame stuff, and language matters, and the way images matter, and how we create that, because we are selecting the information for people to get, and that we do have a really important role to play in creating a better, a more inclusive and overall, hopefully equitable world. I think we're getting close to that 45-minute mark, and I know that people probably, if they joined early, they're now been in here for at least an hour. So I want to give people a chance to refresh. Robert and I will stick around. We have about 5 minutes where we can answer some questions or just field some things. But let's call this like sort of formally. We'll close this session and we'll see everyone back at 11 o'clock for Dr. Lee Foote. And if America, you could toss the description in there for people if we have that easy for folks, then the topic description. But essentially he's talking about different understandings of environmentalism and ecology. And Robert, maybe you want to give a plug for this 11?
Yeah, Dr. Lee Foote, he was taught sustainable resources at the University of Alberta, and I met him some years ago, and he's an avid hunter, and I was a hunter at the time as well, not to his degree. And I had ethical boundaries that I wouldn't cross when I was hunting. And I've had discussions with Dr. Foote about how does he communicate to a broader audience on what can be a very difficult and controversial subject. Some people are totally against hunting. No, it's bad. Anyway, he has a very, very interesting perspective on hunting and sustainability and our role in the environment. So I urge you to stick around. It's a fascinating presentation that he does, and it'll probably get you thinking. It's too bad he's not around to serve us any of his venison gumbo that he makes. And he can explain that as well. I don't know if he has a vegetarian option or not, but it's a very interesting, should be a very interesting presentation.
Okay, thanks, Robert, and thanks so much, everyone, for coming to this event. Like I said, Robert and I will just kind of hang out in the room here. We'll sort of have an informal 5 minutes here, and then at 10:45 we'll switch it over to the slideshow and the music and so on, and we'll set up for the 11 o'clock session.